Good morning. Welcome. I'm Mark Eagan, President and CEO of the Capital Region Chamber and the Center for Economic Growth, also known as CEG. For those of you who might not be as familiar with CEG, we are the region's economic development organization dedicated to driving economic growth in our 8-county, 1.1 million person capital region. We do this by attracting investment and talent, by growing manufacturing and workforce capabilities, leveraging our industry clusters, and developing our entrepreneurial ecosystem. CEG serves as a catalyst and works with our partners and stakeholders to prepare the region to compete, to move high impact strategies and projects forward. Today would be an example. CEG couldn't carry out its mission without the loyal support of nearly 250 investors in business, government, education, and our nonprofit sectors who are committed to sustainable economic growth and shared prosperity. And our deep thanks to each of our investors for your support. We're pleased that all of you could join us today as we explore more about offshore wind, as we look to maximize the growth opportunities for our community. New York has emerged as the undisputed US leader by animating the market with the largest combined offshore wind solicitation to date. And we've heard loud and clear from the Biden administration that offshore wind is a federal priority. The industry is at a tipping point. Because of the driving force of NYSERDA, along with the forward thinking and planning by the Port of Albany and the Port of Queens, in partnership with Albany County and the City of Albany, and with CEG's aggressive pursuit of the industry, the capital region is becoming an emerging hub for the manufacturing of offshore wind component parts. CEG has been working for the past 2 years to position our region as the location of choice for component manufacturers and supply chain to serve the offshore wind industry. The region has best-in-class port assets and the workforce and manufacturing capabilities necessary to compete. Today's program is presented in partnership with the Advance Albany County Alliance and Capitalize Albany. I also want to thank Couch White for their support for this summit through their sponsorship. Couch White is a recognized leader in energy law with an established regional, national, and international client base that includes numerous Fortune 500 companies. I also want to thank our audio-visual partner, CMI AV. We have an impressive lineup of content and speakers this morning who provide a high level of insight on what's driving New York's market. How do we build a fully enabled region and what's needed for a ready workforce? We'll learn about what's happening at our ports, and we'll hear from global offshore wind developers and manufacturers who are investing here. Each of you should have received the agenda, and we're going to drop a link in the chat feature. Speaker bios are linked if you want to learn more. Our elected officials have provided unwavering support as we pursue these opportunities on behalf of our region. While Senator Gillibrand and Congressman Tonko could not join us in person, we have recorded remarks that we'll turn to now.
Project to the capital region. I'd also like to thank all of our workforce, manufacturing, and business partners, both local and international, for your investment in upstate New York. Today's summit is an opportunity to celebrate the future of advanced manufacturing and local labor in the capital region. As the nation's first offshore wind tower manufacturer, we are boldly leading the way by creating jobs and technology that aren't just ready for the future, but building it. As we work to recover from the pandemic, we have a moral obligation to keep that same commitment to creating a greener future in mind. To truly build back better, we need to rethink the infrastructure of our communities and our economy, and to harness the unmatched talent and innovation of American workers. It's essential that we continue to invest in quality jobs locally and enact common sense policies that generate revenue for infrastructure development, clean energy manufacturing, climate resiliency, and job creation. When we strengthen our clean energy sector and invest in green technology, we will see the returns for years to come. Taking these actions now will help us get hundreds of New Yorkers back to work in good jobs and create new tools and technologies to help combat the very real threats of the climate crisis. Moving towards renewable energy alternatives like wind will also modernize and bolster our economy by reducing our reliance on fossil fuels, putting us on the path to sustainable prosperity. The recovery efforts that invest in our own backyards can make sure our neighbors have the resources to rebuild and thrive. They can and should, and also help us to take the lead on the world stage. The offshore wind tower manufacturing facility is the perfect example of how building clean energy can reignite both our local and global economy, and I cannot wait to see how you help reshape our state, nation, and the world. I will keep fighting to strengthen American industry and bring good paying jobs to New York, and I am ready to work alongside you to build a more sustainable and equitable future. Thank you.
I want to thank Mark and the entire CEG staff for organizing this event, and more importantly, for the years of work to help bring the economic opportunities of offshore wind to our region. And obviously, we would not be in this position today without the vision of those who see the potential in our local ports and the efforts of local and county leaders. Since January, there has been much excitement in D.C. around infrastructure and clean energy and creating good-paying, sustainable jobs as we begin building America's economic recovery in the post-pandemic era. Our capital region is in a strong position to benefit from such federal investments, and I do believe that offshore wind could be at the center of that agenda. Offshore wind is more than just a technology needed to achieve our nation's clean energy goals. It's a rare opportunity to create a whole new industry in our United States. The Biden administration appreciates this, and the capital region can play a major role. Recently, Energy Secretary Granholm and Interior Secretary Haaland announced a national goal to deploy 30 gigawatts of offshore wind energy by 2030. This, of course, follows New York's commitment of 9,000 megawatts by the year 2035. This nationwide effort will support approximately 77,000 jobs, generating electricity that can power more than 10 million homes, all while cutting 78 million metric tons of carbon dioxide emissions. And to hit that bold national target, we will need to upgrade America's ports, create new R&D opportunities, and incentivize domestic manufacturing. All of that can and is happening right here. COVID exposed the challenges we can face when we become too reliant on foreign supply chains. With offshore wind, we can build our own resilient supply chains, in many cases based right in the region where that power is needed. I will certainly be working in Washington to achieve these lofty goals, including clean energy incentives like the offshore wind investment tax credit, leasing and permitting for new wind energy areas, and grants to manufacturers to establish and retrofit their facilities to make component parts. But we need to do it right. Our offshore wind industry can show the nation that clean energy jobs can be high-quality union jobs, creating jobs, revitalizing our ports and infrastructure, and growing opportunities for local manufacturers, all while reducing pollution. This can be the model for our nation's transition to a cleaner, more competitive economy of the future. I look forward to working together and aligning local, state, and federal efforts to make certain that our region realizes these opportunities. Thank you for all you have done and will do to help build the capital region's and America's clean future.
Thank you, Senator. And thank you, Congressman, for joining us this morning and for your advocacy and support. Albany County and the City of Albany have been true partners with CEG in our work within this sector. It's my pleasure to welcome Albany County Executive Dan McCoy to extend a greeting.
Mark, thank you for that warm introduction. I appreciate that. But, you know, today's an exciting day for offshore wind, and especially the summit and partners, because it takes partners to get things done. It's not one person that makes something go forward. It's a partnership that makes things happen. And I do want to say to CEG, Katie Newcomb, thank you for the outstanding job you're doing. And to, you know, our great partner at NYSERDA, thank you for everything that you're doing there. And it's awesome that you got appointed Doreen Harris as president. It's been a lot of great conversations with you to move forward. And thanks to Chamber and to everyone. Because if you said to me back in 2012, when I took office as county executive, that this is going to be our future, I probably would have laughed at you. And I would have said, yeah, okay, sure, let's move on. The fact from Governor Cuomo, from NYSERDA to everyone, to the companies, the partnerships internationally and domestically, thank you, thank you, thank you. To making Albany County one of the greenest counties in the state of New York, that's been a mission of mine. And to really say we're going to take that carbon footprint, and we're actually not just going to talk about it, we're going to have tangible results going into the future. And that's what we have here. To Rich Hendricks from the Port of Albany, to Queens, thank you for everything that you're doing, for your leadership, because not only does it's not just about jobs, it's about quality of life. And it's about changing the outcome for people in different communities that don't have opportunities. And the jobs that are going to be created, the permanent jobs, 300 in Albany, a couple hundred down in Queens, is going to be game changer in the short term union jobs. But what people don't realize, when I was a kid growing up in the south end of Albany at the port, it was the other jobs, the catalyst to other jobs. It could have just been a service station. It could have been a mom and pop store on the corner, or just housing in general, people coming back into the community, which has a ripple effect for generations to come, and to be good stewards, to show not just our kids, all kids, and the next generation that you can move forward and you can do great things, but you can be great stewards of the land to hand off to the next generation to build off of this. So to everyone that's been involved in the offshore wind industry, thank you so much. I look forward to this partnership. I look forward to moving forward. And to the governor, again, thank you for having the vision and making this happen. Tonight, sir, to Doreen, I enjoy our conversations in your inspiration and all this too. And to everyone involved, thank you to all the partners, Kathy Sheehan, Mayor Sheehan, everyone else, and our Senate and our Assembly members, John McDonald, Pat Fahey, Neil Breslin. Thank you for your leadership. But to Mark, thank you. Thank you for everything you're doing, and to our Congressman Paul Tonko and Senator Gillibrand, and especially our great leader, Senator Chuck Schumer, who's been on top of everything here in New York State as well as in DC. My hat's off to him. And again, I look forward to a productive day and a great partnership, because let's admit this, you can't build a foundation of your house without partners, and you can't put the floor joists on there without having a good foundation. This is a great foundation to other tangible things in this community and opportunities for our people to live a better, cleaner, healthier life. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Dan, and you're so right. It is really partners that pull all this together. And as you mentioned her name, Albany Mayor Kathy Sheehan has been a terrific partner, not just on this project, on so many initiatives to move our city and our region forward. Mayor Sheehan, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mark. And good morning, everyone, to our friends in Denmark. God eftermiddag. It is afternoon there, but this is really an exciting opportunity for the city of Albany, for our entire region. I want to echo County Executive's thank yous. I can always count on the County Executive to make sure that everyone is thanked. So I'm not going to repeat all those names, but I just want to echo that thank you. This is really an incredible opportunity. You know, as we have talked about the green economy in this country for many people, it means different things to different constituencies. But for a lot of people, they have conceived the green economy as somehow a loss, having to use less energy, having to reduce our consumption. And what those of us who have been in this space know is that the green economy is about jobs and about opportunity. And this is an incredible example right here in the capital region of what the new industries that will be spawned by the green economy can create. It wouldn't have happened without the hard work of those who we're going to hear from today, of our friends at the port, and of everyone who came together and said, we are the ideal location for this project. We have an amazing workforce. We have incredible institutions of higher education who can help to grow that workforce and to do all that we can to make sure that this is successful. And we have bigger aspirations. We want to be a hub for all things wind, for all things green economy. This is a place where great ideas come to be germinated and to grow. It dates all the way back to our early history. This is a place where in 1754, Benjamin Franklin proposed the radical idea of the 13 colonies joining as a union. It was an idea that was before its time, but it became the basis for our Constitution. So for those who are investing here, know that you are coming to a place where great ideas are born and great ideas are germinated and great ideas grow. And so I am excited about the fact that while we are saving our planet for our children and our grandchildren and their children, we are also creating industries that are going to provide for their financial future, that are going to provide opportunities for them for decades and decades to come. I'm so excited about this. We look forward to working with all of the partners who are going to be presenting here today and to more who want to come. This is a place where there's an energy, there's an excitement, there's a well-educated workforce, there is beauty. This is one of the most beautiful places in the country to come to live. And so there is much opportunity here. And again, I'm grateful to all of those who made it possible. Thank you, Mark.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. You know, I don't know if there's a better way to kick off our Offshore Wind Summit than to hear from recently appointed President and CEO of the New York Energy Research and Development Authority, also known as NYSERDA. Doreen Harris has served as acting president and CEO since June of last year. And we were thrilled when acting was removed from her title last week when she was officially appointed its permanent president and CEO. For those of you who might not be as familiar with NYSERDA, it is a public benefit corporation that advances innovative energy solutions to improve New York's economy and environment. Doreen has held public and private sector leadership roles in advancing clean energy projects and engineering companies for more than 20 years. During her years in public service, she has held executive, technical, and public policy positions at NYSERDA, most recently as Vice President of Large-Scale Renewables. She oversaw the state's nation-leading advancement of renewable resources and spearheaded the strategic development of New York's offshore wind resource, including the execution of the state's offshore wind master plan. Before embarking on a career in public service, Ms. Harris spent more than a decade in the energy sector serving in management and engineering roles. She received her Bachelor's of Science in Chemical Engineering from the University of Rochester and her Master's in Business Administration from the University at Albany. I'm pleased to welcome this morning a friend of CEG and our capital region. Please welcome NYSERDA's President and CEO, Doreen Harris.
Good morning, and thank you for the kind introduction, Mark. Indeed, this is one of my favorite topics to talk about, so it's a real pleasure to be here today, and something that we've seen for many, many years in the making, this moment that we're now realizing here in the capital region. So it's a real pleasure to be asked to speak. So indeed, I'm Doreen Harris, the President and CEO of NYSERDA, officially as of last week. From my bio, you can hear the fact that we at NYSERDA have been thinking about and working on this resource for a long time, a number of years. Under Governor Cuomo's leadership, New York is the nation's leader, no doubt, hands down, in advancing offshore wind. And what we're talking about today is the manifestation of that vision, really becoming prominent with respect to the actual development of projects and other opportunities for all of us here. So I know I'm supposed to be able to move the slides. I think I now am. So I spoke about New York's leadership. 9,000 megawatts of offshore wind by 2035 is our goal. It is the largest goal in the nation, and it is part of the nation-leading Climate Act that was signed into law in 2019. New York is leading the way in not only addressing climate change, but realizing the benefits from the investments that we are together advancing. So this is indicative of a broader ecosystem that we are building in our state, and I'm very excited to talk about it anytime. 9,000 megawatts of offshore wind. What does that mean for us as a state? That means 10,000 jobs. That means a third of our electricity served by offshore wind. It means billions of dollars of infrastructure investments that we knew would come with this commitment and the realization of it. And when we look back in 2019, when the Climate Act was signed, we took that goal and we put it into action with the award of our first two statewide offshore wind projects. First, the 816 megawatt Empire Wind project developed by Equinor. And second, the 880 megawatt project developed by a joint venture of Ørsted and Eversource. And that is really the beginning. And in that year, there were major investments that were advanced from those awards. One of them was at the Port of Coymans, who is represented here today, that will be utilized for the foundations for one of those projects and beyond. So we were beginning, and even in 2019, to see the investments, and you can see the ports on this map in yellow that were part of the investments from our first phase of awards that in and of themselves were thrilling and exciting. And then in January, the governor's 2021 agenda featured a suite of initiatives that really expanded our climate leadership and specifically grew our green energy economy. So this year in January, Governor Cuomo announced the largest combined renewable energy awards ever by a U.S. state. And this is a headline that New York seems to be able to achieve annually these days, very seriously achieving our commitments, bringing projects forward and bringing the investments associated with them. So overall, we now have 12,400 megawatts of capacity, enough to power 6 million homes in our collective pipeline. And the January announcement was significant, both with respect to the land-based renewable investments that we saw, with 24 projects, primarily solar projects in upstate New York, but notably also a very significant investment in offshore wind, with nearly 2,500 megawatts awarded and investments of $644 million in ports across New York State. So this was a significant day, and to build on that, certainly when we think about it collectively, now we have 5 offshore wind projects being developed toward our 9,000 megawatt goal. The investments from January were significant because they built on the investments of 2019 that I referenced. And now, when we look at this collectively, this map is beginning to take shape in ways that are so exciting for us as a state, but notably, particularly exciting for all of us in the capital region. In January, it was announced that there would be a major investment in the Port of Albany, building on the Port of Coymans investments I referenced. At the Port of Albany, what you'll be hearing about is an investment associated with our award to Equinor by Marmon and Welcon to establish the nation's first tower manufacturing facility at the Port of Albany. That tower manufacturing facility is going to serve both land-based and offshore wind projects and be a very significant anchor along with Koymans, in building on what we always knew, that the capital region offers a very significant value proposition to this industry. And so when I speak to you next year and the year after, I expect to have additional good news to share on building on this momentum. And when we look at it from a jobs perspective, it's important to note that the capital region serves to benefit primarily from manufacturing, which is a great anchor industry. It provides significant long and short-term jobs, short-term as the ports are upgraded to serve the industry, and long-term as they serve that industry for many, many years and decades. And when we look at the jobs we're talking about, you can see we're talking about hundreds and thousands of jobs that we're already seeing coming our way and only building over time. And when we look at the partnerships that are critical to these investments, I cannot say enough of the importance of the work that the Center for Economic Growth has accomplished in that time. For many years, I've been accompanied and seen the team at various offshore wind conferences, in meetings, in engagement, bolstering this huge opportunity, but also the value that our region can offer. So we're very excited at this ecosystem and the jobs that we're realizing now as a result of it. And critically important is to train the workforce of the future. And now as we speak, we are realizing our $20 million commitment to offshore wind training on a statewide basis, with our first solicitation on the street to train the first group of workers that will begin this summer. And when we think about the opportunity, it is important to note that it is very local. We need people from the capital region to serve this industry, and we're excited at the ecosystem building to do just that. But the realization of these training opportunities is one that we see very notably coming to our local communities and benefiting them as well. And it would be remiss if I did not note the critical context of the new federal administration as bolstering these investments beyond even where they sit today. So it was important to note, and I know it was mentioned before, that the Biden administration has reinforced a very strong commitment to offshore wind, both in establishing an offshore wind goal for the nation, but also to realizing that goal. And one very exciting aspect of that goal is the federal government is now considering new areas for offshore wind development in the New York Bight, as we call it. While that's a far distance from the capital region, these are the projects that ultimately our region will supply. And so when we look at the Biden administration's actions of just a couple of weeks ago, and broadly from infrastructure development perspective, we see not only goal establishment, but port investments, tax credits, job training, research and development, all of the preconditions needed to bolster this industry on from a federal perspective as well. So we look very much forward to working with the federal government, already have, but only expanding on that in the new administration. And so with that, I hope I've given you a quick walkthrough, a history that is really in the making, both with respect to New York and the capital region. It's such an exciting time to see this all coming together, and I'm very excited to hear more about these details today. So thank you.
Thanks, Doreen, very much for that insightful look at the enormous potential that the clean energy economy and offshore wind have for New York. I'm Dave Rooney, Strategic Industry Advisor to CEG. And, if we're going to try and realize the ambitious agenda that Doreen noted, it requires leadership, commitment, and collaboration. We've seen that in recent weeks and months at the federal, state, and local levels, as already has been mentioned. Yet putting that leadership into action and getting it done is no easy feat. Luckily, we have a dynamic partner, ally, and role model in Denmark, which not only built the world's first offshore wind farm in 1991, but they recently announced plans to build an artificial island in the North Sea to serve as a hub for further offshore wind development. Now, that sounds to me like leadership and innovation in action. To tell us more about Denmark's impressive track record and ambitious plans, and see how those plans might be borrowed from, shall we say, as we develop the industry here in New York and in the United States, we're fortunate to be joined today by Her Excellency Lone Denker Visborg, Danish Ambassador to the US, and James Glennie, Sector Expert on Offshore Wind at the Danish Embassy in Washington. Ambassador Visborg is the Danish Ambassador to the United States. She represents the government of Denmark here in Washington. Most recently, Ambassador Visborg held a position as State Secretary and Chief Operating Officer in the Danish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. She has also served as Ambassador of Denmark to Spain. She began her career with Danish Foreign Service more than 25 years ago and has held various positions in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, including State Secretary for Foreign Policy, Undersecretary for Global Security, and Head of Department for Security Policy, both in Copenhagen. Please welcome Ambassador Visborg.
Thank you very much, David, for that kind introduction. I also want to just take the opportunity to thank Doreen Harris for the excellent collaboration we have with NYSERDA and to congratulate her with slashing the acting before her title. We look forward to taking that cooperation further. Good morning, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here with you today for this Offshore Wind Summit. You know, in Denmark, we certainly haven't figured out all the solutions to transitioning to a clean energy economy, but we do believe that there's a lot to be gained from openly sharing experience between countries. Countries can learn from each other and inspire each other. And therefore, I'm pleased to be with you here today and open this part of the session. Denmark and the US have long enjoyed a close and mutually beneficial relationship. The United States is Denmark's closest and most important ally, and also an important trading partner. We have close cultural and historical ties, and naturally we also consult closely on European and other regional political and security matters, and cooperate extensively to promote peace and stability well beyond Europe's borders. But during the last couple of years, we have seen that this collaboration on security matters has increasingly been complemented by a focus on government-to-government collaboration on energy policies. This collaboration cuts across the federal administration and individual states such as New York, New Jersey, and California. We believe that our two countries benefit from sharing experience on policy frameworks, but also on successful policy implementation. Again, we believe that we have a lot to learn from each other. I'm confident that we'll continue to see a further strengthening of our collaboration in this space in the coming years. Policies related to climate and energy are fundamental to our societies, and these will increasingly, I think, be interlinked with foreign policy and security aspects, as well as trade policies. I would also like at this point to stress that for me, non-state actors also play a crucial role in advancing and strengthening our two nations' collaboration. Oftentimes we see that it's non-state actors such as non-profit organizations, businesses, and knowledge institutions that really push for higher ambitions and show how green solutions can be implemented in practice. The newest Danish initiative, as you mentioned, David, is to construct an energy island. An energy island with clean electricity for millions of European households, an energy island with clean fuels for ships and planes, an energy island for innovation. The decision to construct energy islands marks the beginning of a new era, we believe, of sustainable energy production. The energy islands will serve as power plants, gathering and distributing green electricity from hundreds of wind turbines surrounding the island directly to consumers in countries surrounding the North Sea. The abundance of offshore wind energy can then be used to produce climate-friendly fuels for shipping, aviation, heavy industries, or heavy-duty vehicles. Today, more than 70% of Denmark's electricity is generated from renewables. In a few years, we will produce more than 100% electricity from renewable energy and thus become a net exporter of green electricity. But how did that come about? I would like to explain a little bit. So it all started back in 1973, really, when the OPEC oil crisis forced the government to focus on reducing reliance on fossil fuel imports. This also stimulated the first experimental wind turbines, and with time, a greater focus on environmentally friendly forms of energy. And in 1991, the world's first offshore wind farm was erected off the coast of the Danish island of Lolland. It was a small project compared to the projects we see today, but it marked the beginning of a new era where offshore wind has come to play an increasingly significant role in the energy system. Denmark has benefited from the substantial job generation that comes with the focus on this energy source. Today, we have more jobs in green energy than in the oil and gas sector. We have transformed old shipyards into modern offshore test facilities, creating new green jobs for local communities. It's important to say that for the burgeoning offshore wind industry, regulatory predictability is of utmost importance. At the end of the day, what is necessary is to generate confidence in regulatory approval processes and the framework conditions surrounding the industry. This is the requirement for unlocking huge investments and for harnessing all the benefits that come with this source of energy. In the US, though only one project is yet operational in federal waters, there's likewise an enormous potential for offshore wind power. States along the US East Coast, as has been said by previous speakers, have committed to constructing more than 30 gigawatts of offshore wind power through 2035. That's going to be an amazing journey that will create thousands of sustainable jobs along the way. So what has Denmark learned about energy policy over the last decades? Let me point to some important steps in this journey. First and foremost, setting long-term objectives have ensured a stable policy environment. Cross-party commitment and long-term planning are critical to driving significant energy policy change. And secondly, forging strong public-private sector cooperation has accelerated research and innovation. Innovation doesn't always happen by itself. It requires companies, markets, and sometimes effective policy interventions. Thirdly, developing strong power links to neighboring countries has allowed us to integrate more than 55% of wind energy into our electricity system while maintaining a very high level of security of supply. So those are some of the lessons that we have learned that we would happily share with you, and we look forward to this exchange of experiences and lessons learned. And with that, I would just like to thank you all for attending the summit. And I believe that James Glennie, who works here at our embassy in Washington, specifically on offshore wind, will now speak in a little bit more detail about Denmark's energy journey over the last 50 years. And we'll also say a few words about the upcoming series of offshore wind tours, in which I hope many of you here today will be able to participate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador, very much for those remarks and those critical insights into the industry and how it's grown in Denmark and what we can learn from that. As you mentioned, we're going to be joined now by James Glennie, the energy sector expert at the Embassy of Denmark. For those of us who've been tracking this industry over the last several years and have attended conferences and summits like this one, James is a familiar face. He is not just well-versed in the industry, but he's an articulate and enjoyable speaker. So James, take it away, and we look forward to your insights.
David, thank you. Thanks for those kind words. Yeah, I think basically I'd like to start with just saying a big thank you to the organizers, Mark Eagan, Katie Newcomb, and David Rooney, for putting on this fantastic event, and also for asking the Ministry of Foreign Affairs through the Embassy of Denmark to be involved. I'm really truly honored to be here today, to have heard the insightful perspectives from the key decision makers that have already spoken, and then to have the opportunity to enlarge on the ambassador's comments about the clean energy experience of Denmark over the last few decades. It's a really genuine pleasure for me to see, after 20 years in the industry, finally, that the US offshore wind industry is moving ahead at such a rapid pace. I'm really looking forward to hearing the comments from the leading developers that will deliver New York's offshore wind capacity in the years ahead. And also, given the massive investment by Marmon and Welcon, I'm really looking forward to hearing also from Patrick Pellerin and Carsten Pedersen later. So if technology is serving us well, I should be able to move my slide forward. I don't seem to. Oh, maybe you can advance the slides for me. Thank you. So my name, just very briefly, is, as David mentioned, James Glennie. I'm a geophysicist and financial analyst by training. I've worked in energy for 30 years and in renewables, mainly offshore wind, for 20 years. I'm based, as David mentioned, at the Embassy of Denmark in DC, where I head up offshore wind activities for the Trade Council in North America. A couple of months ago, we started discussions with CG Albany about the experiences of Denmark in offshore wind and how we could best share those experiences with you. The result of those discussions was a twofold plan of action, which Katie and David kindly asked me to talk about today. So in the first section, I would like to just talk about and really expand on the comments from Ambassador Visborg regarding the key policy developments in Denmark over the last 50 years that have led us to where we're at today. And then in the second part, I will just move on and talk a little bit more about the virtual wind tours. I'll try and advance the slides. No, if you could do that for me, that'd be great, please. The next slide. So we put our collective heads together and really reached a decision that energy policy in Denmark truly started with the 1973 OPEC oil embargo. And I think some of you in the audience will no doubt remember the 1973 OPEC oil embargo. It was quite an event. Oil prices jumped, I would say, overnight. It was actually over a year by 300%, from the staggering level of $3 to $12 a barrel, which in inflation-adjusted terms was round about from $26 to $65 a barrel. That amount of money is not actually that much. Oil prices actually this morning for West Texas Intermediate was $60. So it's very comparable. But the problem was that the global economy at that stage, and certainly it was the case in Denmark, was not particularly energy efficient. I think the world was producing about 80 cents of GDP per kilogram of oil consumption in 1973. Today, that figure is closer to 10 times higher. It's $8 per kilogram of oil. So that combination of oil shock and price jumps led to a global recession in 1973 to 75. And Denmark was certainly not excluded from that. Next slide, please. Energy policy, as you well know, doesn't happen overnight. And in fact, Denmark's energy policy, first energy policy as a result of the oil shock, didn't happen until 1976 when Dansk Energipolitik was published. Interestingly enough, that study, that strategy, didn't identify offshore wind or solar as significant contributors, and in fact said they wouldn't be until after 2000. The focus there was on nuclear fuels and coal. But interestingly enough, it had the sort of the roots to what we see today, which is the need for international energy cooperation, the importance of research into new forms of energy, and reducing import dependency. And actually, on a particular note, although that the paper didn't see a significant role for wind energy by 2000, wind energy was actually generating 20% of Denmark's electricity by that time. Next slide, please. Very quickly, we went through the archives and we just dug up some old photos here, which for those in the industry, you might find rather amusing, of some of the early days of the industry. This happened in the late 70s, where some of the early developments were starting to be realized. And in the top row there, you can see some early attempts of building wind turbines, one of the very earliest ones, 0.5 kilowatts, on the back of a tractor-drawn trailer in 1977. For those in the industry, you might appreciate the picture in the middle. That's Henrik Stiesdal, who became the Chief Technology Officer at Siemens Gamesa, and was really a grandfather of many of the developments in the modern wind industry. But other pictures there kind of speak for themselves, and you can just see that they look kind of amusing when you look back on them today, but what was so important about them is they laid the groundwork for what we are today, which is a multinational, multi-billion-dollar industry. Next slide, please. So this led us into the 80s very quickly because we're a bit pushed time. I'm just trying to make up a few minutes to get us back on track. But that Energy Plan 81, a couple of notable things. It continued the subsidy scheme for renewables, promoted a continued expansion of wind, and it promoted the expansion of electricity networks, both internally and internationally. Notably, in 1988, Denmark became the first country in the world to generate, where wind generated 1% of its total electricity. Next slide, please. '90 saw the world's first plan for CO2 reduction produced by Denmark, Energy 2000. I won't read through the various line items there, but I think anyone who's familiar with energy policy today will look at those and go, yeah, those are pretty standard. The interesting thing was that when they were floated in 1990, they were all pretty groundbreaking things. And so they were groundbreaking and they were new concepts. The ambassador mentioned the building of the world's first offshore wind farm in 1991. That was the Vindeby. It was a 11 turbine project with a total installed capacity of 4.95 megawatts, which is pretty staggering today when you consider that the biggest turbines on the market are 15 megawatt machines. So that entire project was a third the capacity of a single turbine, offshore wind turbine today. There was a lot of industry skepticism when that was built, and people said it wouldn't work offshore, but it did, and that project ran for 25 years. Next slide, please. Sorry, next slide. Thank you. Very quickly, I just wanted to mention Svend Auken. He was a bit of a legend in Denmark. He was generally acknowledged to be one of the most naturally gifted and charismatic of Danish politicians of his generation. One of the key things about Svend is that he actually occupied he was Minister of both Energy and Environment between 94 and 2001. And the critical point about that and the key learning from that is that it's very important to do policy across departments. And he integrated policy both between energy and environment during that time. He also made some very significant pledges with regards to offshore wind capacity and offshore wind potential. And in fact, his statements at the World Wildlife Fund conference in Washington, D.C. in September '97 could be credited with being really the foundation of the modern offshore wind industry, given the scale that they were envisaging. Next slide, please. Just to move very quickly outside of Denmark, I mean, the key message here is that policy doesn't happen in a local vacuum. Policy needs to happen on a much broader basis. And from a European perspective, that represents Brussels and the European Union. And in fact, the key thing from the European perspective in terms of energy development and clean energy development has been the EU electricity and gas directives. The first one for electricity was released in '96 and gas in '98. There have been a number of subsequent directives, most recently in 2019. I think the key point about those is that they've led to a much more competitive, customer-centric, flexible and non-discriminatory EU market, which has really allowed the European Union to move ahead with its very aggressive renewable energy targets that it has today. And not least of those is the 300 gigawatts offshore wind target by 2050. Next slide, please. So where are we at today? Just to sort of summarize very quickly the lessons since 1973. Denmark in 1973 was generating, as this chart shows, none of its electricity from renewable sources. And it really took about 10 years after that oil shock for the initial policies to be formed and for the industry to respond. But once it did respond, and you can see it really started to ramp up pretty fast. And about 20 years after the OPEC oil shock, 1993, very rapid ramp up in wind energy and biomass, and increasingly now in solar power. And in fact, this chart runs up to 2019, when just under 80% of Denmark's electricity was being generated by wind, solar, biomass, and a few other things like hydroelectricity. So next slide, please. Just to summarize this portion of the presentation, just the main energy policy learnings, and really just to expand on some of the points mentioned by the ambassador earlier. When we sat down and thought about the learnings over the last 50 years, I think the single most crucial thing that comes out is the need for long-term vision. It's really important to set a long-term vision, and not just to set it, but to hold to it, because setting a different long-term vision every 2 years is not very helpful. That long-term vision has been critical to allowing private industry to make the plans it needs to make to invest in this multi-billion-dollar industry. It's also been critical for allowing stakeholders to gain a very clear idea of what is needed and what are the issues they're facing, and whether those stakeholders, they could be environmental stakeholders or shipping or fisheries or any number of different stakeholders. Academia is also one which has been a common theme over the last 50 years in Denmark. It's very important for academia, which at the end of the day is educating the brains and the resources of tomorrow. It's very important for academia to have a long-term understanding of what they need to focus on and where they need to build their skills. And finally, at the end of the day, this is all about individuals and people. Finally, individuals need to have a vision as to what they should be aiming for. What do people need to build their training capabilities around? What do they need to learn for? And what do their children need to be ready for? And what are the skills they need to acquire? Regional collaboration is really important, but realistically, it's also really hard. I mean, if we look first at infrastructure investment, particularly ports and supply chain, the fundamental issue is that individual regions are competing for investment, and we all know that. But nonetheless, cooperation and coordination is really important. Transmission is likewise very important. If you can't get the electricity to the loads, it's not very useful. Transmission is best and easiest to develop on a direct basis from one project to the point of connection. But long term, it requires planning. And that's something that's been going on in Europe for a long time, and the ambassador alluded to the energy islands. Leasing and PPAs is also a critical one. In Europe, we have a leasing PPA process, which means that competition drives down prices. The problem or the challenge in the US is a bifurcated process, whereby I have separate federal leasing and PPA awards, which tends to drive up costs. So that's going to be an interesting challenge moving forward. Public-private cooperation is critical, again, because of the capital requirements. And as mentioned, it's very important to have an holistic view on energy planning between different departments. And that's something the Biden administration is doing very well. Next slide, and in fact, you can move from that to the slide after that as well, very quickly. Really, that intermission slide was just to say that switching tack now and just talking very quickly about the second part of the presentation, which is the concept of virtual offshore wind tours. There's obviously, as the previous speakers have already mentioned, an awful lot happening at the moment in offshore wind in New York and particularly in the Albany region. And in the discussions we had a while earlier with Katie and David, we talked about the best way to get people, just to get people to realize the potentials in the offshore wind market. And one of those is to make offshore wind visits up close and personal. Certainly the experience we've had in making those visits over the last few years has, we believe, made a tremendously significant impact on the development of offshore wind along the US eastern seaboard. couple of months ago, we were approached by CEG Albany and asked if we could devise something that would fit the local needs. Next slide, please. And in fact, what we came up with was a set of online virtual tours. And the purpose of these is to give local stakeholders an opportunity to get a better understanding of the offshore wind industry in a dynamic, interactive, online, memorable, and visual event. It's to connect those stakeholders with their counterparts in Denmark so they can share experiences, and really to contribute in a meaningful way to the building of the supply chain in New York. Next slide, please. The basic structure of the individual tours is that they each would consist of multiple themed sessions, each of which would be 1 hour long and targeted at particular subject areas. I'm shown here are the particular subject areas we developed with Katie and David, and we'd be open to talking about more if there's interest. Hopefully this is of interest. We'll be publishing details very shortly, and we'd really encourage you, if it is of interest, to sign up or get in touch if you have any questions. So that's it from my end. David, I'm sorry I ran a bit over time, but hopefully it leaves a few minutes for any questions that there may be. Thank you.
Thanks very much, James. Really appreciate those insights and lessons learned from all the fascinating policy and implementation activities you guys have been engaged in Denmark over 30 years. I think we have time for 1 or 2 questions just to keep ourselves on track. I'm going to ask you one that I hope maybe builds off of some of your final points, as well as the virtual tour concept. Can you share with us a bit about, in terms of workforce and supply chain, what would you encourage us to prepare for? And what should we focus on in order to really successfully host and support the manufacturing and development of this industry here in New York, and specifically here in the capital region?
Wow, that's a question. I think it's having had my own company and having worked in a small company myself, and also worked in a very large company. I worked at ExxonMobil. I think it's very easy for big companies to say, you know what, we've got a 20-year vision, because they have the budgets to pay for that. I think it's very hard for small companies to be able to say, to be able to listen to a message that potentially there's $100 billion, opportunity if you look at the entire Eastern Seaboard coming in the next 15, 20 years. But it's very hard for a small company to look at that and say, I need to get ready today, because I think for most small companies, it's about meeting the immediate cash flow needs. I think my advice would be there's a lot of assistance out there, regional assistance, federal assistance, and I would encourage small companies to take this seriously. We've gone through the same process in Europe, whereby 30 years ago in Europe, everyone was like, yeah, that's never going to happen, is it? And it did happen. It's going to happen a lot faster here. So I would encourage small companies to take advantage of the federal and local assistance, get trained up, understand the market, understand the potential, and get working in it.
I think that's well taken, James. We've got a terrific history of innovation and of manufacturing here in this region, with companies, from small startups all the way through to major manufacturers in this industry itself. So understanding how we can help those companies to access opportunities and learn more about the specific needs, I think, is a critical effort that not just we at CEG, but all the folks on this webinar, and then certainly our partners here in the region need to focus on. So thank you for that. One more quick question, and then we'll move on to hearing more from our developers who are going to be engaged in activities here in the region. You mentioned briefly about research universities and what kind of role they can play. We're fortunate to have research universities and private sector research capacity here within the region. Any specific thoughts, and how is research funded in Denmark, and is there something we can learn from that model?
I think research, if you look back over policy development since the Dansk Energipolitik in 1976, I mean, research and R&D has been a critical long-term component. So I think my impression, I worked at the University of Houston down in Texas. My impression is that oftentimes in the United States, R&D doesn't have that same long-term focus, but it is critical. So I think, you know, my main point on R&D would be it is extremely important. It does play a critical role. Universities are universities, technical colleges, if you're talking about operational training in O&M, they are an incredible resource. And it's very important that they are on board and up to speed and fully with the program, as people say. So yes, I would encourage leveraging that resource, the educational resource, because it is a massive one.
That's a point well taken. We've got more than 20 higher education institutions, as well as many partners here across the region who are going to be critical in providing that training and that workforce pipeline for this industry to be successful here in the region, but across New York. So I think that's all well taken. Thank you, James. And thank you for your comments and the comments of the ambassador to give us a flavor for what's happened in Denmark and what can we learn as we look to grow that industry here in the U.S. and particularly here in the region.
And I think just if I could just jump in, final comment,
Yeah,
we also have an awful lot to learn from the States, and we are learning a lot as we go. So it is a mutual two-way street. So thank you. Appreciate it. Yes, and that's the kind of collaboration at a national level that we think is critical as well. So thank you for sharing that. I'd like to move on and have our developers share some of their perspectives on the industry and on the role of the Capital Region helping support that industry. Leading off, we have Beth Treseder, New England market lead for Equinor US, and Beth, we look forward to your comments on Equinor and the exciting opportunities they're presenting.
Thank you so much. And if I could just get permission to share screen, I'll go ahead and share some slides. And I'll just go ahead here. There we go. Okay. Let's see. Okay, well, happy to start sharing as soon as we can switch over the permissions. But in the meantime, just wanted to provide a quick introduction about Equinor, and then talk through our portfolio and follow up on Doreen's comments earlier about the recent award, and last but certainly not least, touch base and sort of tee it up for our conversation about our manufacturing operations. So first and foremost, and just checking in if it's possible to share screens. Okay. I'll just go ahead then. So a little bit about Equinor. Equinor's ambition as a global energy company is to reach net zero emissions by 2050. And we plan to do so in large part by growing our renewables portfolio. So in 2026, we anticipate having about 4 to 6 gigawatts of renewable capacity, and then growing that to 12 to 16 gigawatts by 2035. And we currently have projects across the globe in offshore wind. So we have a cluster of projects in the Baltic Sea, a cluster of projects in the North Sea, and then, you know, as we'll talk about now, a large cluster on the US East Coast. We do have extensive experience building these projects. We've built the world's first floating offshore wind farm, and we're also currently building a 3.6 gigawatt project in the UK called Dogger Bank, which is the world's largest project under construction at the moment. Equinor has 2 leases in the US. We have a lease directly offshore New York, our Empire Wind lease, and we have a lease offshore New England, our Beacon Wind lease. We acquired Empire Wind in 2017, and we acquired our Beacon Wind lease in 2018. Also mentioned that earlier this year, we finalized a partnership with BP to sell 50% of the interests in both of these lease areas. So Equinor will remain the operator of these projects throughout the development, construction, and operations, but we're happy to have BP as a partner. So a little bit of background, as I mentioned, we acquired Empire Wind in 2017, and we've really been engaged in the state since then. On offshore wind. Back in 2017, we were really evaluating how to build out the offshore wind supply chain to support the growth of the industry. And needless to say, the capital region played a key role. Some of the elements that were really decisive factors, the region has a robust foundation of higher education, as folks have mentioned, strong focus on R&D, and highly skilled jobs. And also it's been a magnet for highly skilled young talent. And so in early conversations with the Port of Albany, we were really thoroughly impressed by the opportunities to make this a hub for manufacturing. The team at the Port of Albany deserves an immense amount of credit for identifying the future needs of the offshore wind industry and preparing accordingly. I imagine it took a tremendous amount of work, and it allowed developers like us to be able to partner relatively quickly. We quickly understood how the port could play a key role in fulfilling a long-term goal in New York to establish a strong manufacturing base that would support this critical renewable energy business of ours. So we're thrilled to be partnering with the Port of Albany and with our manufacturers, Marmon and Welcon, who you'll hear from shortly. We strongly believe that this is a winning partnership, and that has been demonstrated by the award from NYSERDA in January. A little bit about the award. Some of this has already been covered, but just very quickly, earlier this year, in the largest renewable energy procurement in the US to date, Equinor was selected to provide New York with offshore wind power from its Empire Wind and its Beacon Wind projects. This was a joint effort by many partners. We understood from New York and leadership that the goal was not just to build a project, but also to build an industry, a workforce, and a supply chain. And we worked together with many partners to deliver on those goals in our proposals. So these projects that were selected will power over 1 million homes. They'll provide $47 million in workforce development, innovation, and community benefits. They'll provide $25 million in support of regional monitoring of wildlife and key commercial fish stocks. They'll create 5,200 total direct jobs, and they'll also contribute $4.5 billion in value added to the New York economy. So we feel that combined really helps deliver on the full goal of the state. One of the key components of our winning proposal was the partnership with the Port of Albany, Marmon, and Welcon to establish the nation's first offshore wind tower manufacturing facility in New York. A little bit about the Port of Albany, though I know I'll leave it to our partners to go into more detail, but we're thrilled that it'll be the first offshore wind tower manufacturing facility in the US. So it'll produce components for our Empire Wind 1 project, our Empire Wind 2 project, and our Beacon Wind project. It'll require a total of over $350 million in investment, and that will include grants from New York State. And I just want to highlight that the impacts of this manufacturing facility really can't be overstated. It, as I mentioned, will support offshore wind development along the East Coast. It responds to New York's commitment to clean energy and the renewable energy strategy. It positions the region to play a key role in the growing offshore wind industry. And perhaps most importantly, it'll introduce long-term sustainable jobs. So again, we view this facility as a key element to Equinor's long-term goal to establish a strong manufacturing base to support this critical renewable energy business. These facilities will continue to play a crucial role in ensuring that we can meet the strong offshore wind goals that have been set recently on the national level, and then also by the state and our business. So I look forward to working with all of you going forward to realize these plans, and happy to take any questions at the end of this.
Beth, thank you so much. And of course, as is common with technology, we had a little challenge with having you share your screen, but thank you for covering a lot about the rationale behind Equinor and more importantly about the plans and the opportunities that it creates that your investment is going to create, not just for the region, but across New York. So thank you for sharing those thoughts, and we'll come back. I imagine at the end of the program, we'll be looking to handle some more questions. I'd like to turn now to one of your competitors and colleagues, shall we say, Grant Van Wingarden, who is the Senior Supply Chain Development Manager for Ørsted Eversource. And Grant, it's good to see you again. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to hearing more about Ørsted's ongoing plans in New York and across the East Coast of the U.S.
Thank you, Dave. It's great to see you again as well. And thank you to the Center for Economic Growth for organizing an incredible event today. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to speak with you all today. Also, I'm delighted but not surprised to see that there's more than 200 participants in today's webinar, just highlighting the level of excitement and readiness that the capital region has for offshore wind. It's truly inspiring. With Ørsted, my role is focused on helping build the supply chain for offshore wind in the US. And prior to joining Ørsted, I spent my career as a consultant in the oil and gas industry. The reason I highlight this is because the offshore wind industry in the US is and will be reliant on transitions from existing industries. And there's already vast experience with developers like Ørsted, Equinor, and many others in welcoming individuals and businesses who are well established in related industries where there's transferable skills to help build this exciting industry. Today I'm representing Sunrise Wind, which is an 880 megawatt project that is part of a joint venture between Ørsted and Eversource. Ørsted is unparalleled in the offshore wind industry. We have experience with the first offshore wind farm. As previously mentioned, off the coast of Denmark. It was built in 1991 and successfully completed its serviceable life and was decommissioned in 2017. We currently are operating more than 1,500 turbines globally. And in the US, we've secured the largest portfolio of offshore wind lease areas. We're also very proud of being recognized as the most sustainable energy company by Corporate Knights, and for our commitment to achieve a carbon neutral supply chain by 2040. Excuse me. Eversource, our joint venture partner, they are a national leader in the electrical utility industry. They have operation history of more than 100 years in the Northeast and unparalleled experience in energy transmission, and also a leader in energy efficiency, leading the charge to a clean energy transition. The Ørsted and Eversource joint venture covers a large area of offshore lease areas. These are east of Montauk, and as of thus far, we have 3 projects that have been awarded and allocated in these lease areas. Those are South Fork, Revolution, and Sunrise. And we see the capital region as a critical element of our supply chain for building these incredible projects. The capital region has an excellent value proposition to the industry with incredible experiences in advanced manufacturing, research and development, and on top of that, a very experienced and skilled workforce and like its grasp in the tech industry, the capital region is also very experienced and has an aptitude to transitioning and welcoming new industries. And this is why very established companies globally in the offshore wind industry see the capital region as a critical element. On top of all of that, there's excellent ports, Port of Albany, Port of Coinens, already established as great examples. And as you look for similarities in Europe, in the very mature offshore wind market there are many similarities between well-established economies and port regions in Europe that resemble the capabilities that the capital region has today, and certainly point to the bright future that lies ahead. I do highlight that with Ørsted, we have our procurement portal that we are encouraging and welcoming all capital region and all American suppliers to register and identify. And you can see in OrstedProcurement.com. But also I'm thrilled that many of you on today's call that I can recognize have already registered in NYSERDA's supply chain registry. As of my last check, there were 140 companies registered in NYSERDA's registry, and that is an incredible tool that we and our tier 1 suppliers use to identify companies for contracting opportunities. So I just wanted to highlight that if you haven't yet registered, please do so, because that is a great tool and helpful for all of us to work together and identify potential partners. Lastly, in terms of workforce development for the capital region, I would like to really highlight that Sunrise Wind has made a commitment of $1 million to an Upper Hudson Workforce Development Fund. And I encourage all stakeholders to stay tuned for some really exciting updates on that and other opportunities coming to the capital region. And then just lastly, in terms of the advanced manufacturing within our joint venture portfolio, we have a scope called Advanced Foundation Components, or AFC. And these are components, primarily steel and concrete, that we have plans to be fabricating in the capital region and having the capital region as a critical element of that supply chain. Producing these components would involve a substantial amount of building and construction trades. The components are massive themselves, just like everything with offshore wind. The main three are the external concrete platform, the suspended internal platform, and the anode cage. Many of these some of these items are more than 2-story tall, 150 tons, and can be up to 25 feet or more in diameter. Really massive components that we're looking at the capital region and the great capabilities that already exist to be producing those. And with that, just in closing, I would really like to highlight that New York is really leading the charge in offshore wind with 9,000 megawatts. It's attracting the world's leading developers, but also the world leading suppliers and turbine OEMs, foundation manufacturers, and other major components. Really looking at New York as a leader in the US offshore wind industry today and for the many years to come, and certainly viewing the capital region as a center for that is pivotal to the growth of this industry. So thank you very much to the Center for Economic Growth for today and future opportunities to engage with you all. Thank you.
Beth and Grant, I can't thank you enough. For Ørsted, Eversource's investment in the region, as well as Equinor's investment in the region, and your glowing remarks on why you think that our region is competitive and why we stand out. We are just thrilled to have you here today and to have you investing in our community. And we look forward to all the amazing things to come. So I want to thank you both for joining us today. And I want to introduce our ports, right? So without investment by the Port of Albany and the Port of Equinor, we wouldn't be able to realize these opportunities. The ports position the capital region as a location of choice. And first up, I want to introduce Rich Hendrick from the Port of Albany. Rich is the CEO of the port, and he's going to share some information on what's going on at the port. So over to you, Rich.
Thank you, Katie. Just a little background information and the foresight of the state of New York. In 1929, The port was developed through enabling legislation to become an economic and labor force driver for the upstate capital region. In the over 90 years of operation here at the port, we've developed many international maritime customers, and several of our diverse business tenants, some who have been here since the inception of the port, which is a great thing. If they're here that long, they certainly like doing business in the capital region. But as an economic driver, the port is, and I'm happy to be number 3, but we're the 3rd largest employer and economic engine in the capital region. And I say happy to be number 3 because we're only behind the State University and the Albany Medical Center, which is the regional trauma center. So to be included in those business entities is satisfying as far as having to be number 3. But our 23 tenants recently have paid over $80 million in salary and benefits to over 1,400 local employees. And through the diverse business opportunities that the port has, we're responsible for over 4,500 jobs throughout New York State. Our footprint as far as the economy goes locally is pegged at over $800 million. For an operation of this size and with the vision, as I said, of New York State 92 years ago to develop this, I believe that the people that were before me and hopefully the ones after me will continue to strive to meet those goals. But about 7 years ago, not to rest on our laurels of being successful economic driver, our Board of Commissioners guided us with some tremendous vision themselves in undertaking a economic and business assessment, see where we could go, what we were missing out on. And from that assessment, we grabbed the ring and started to run. We found that in order to build on future opportunities, we needed to expand the port. And within a couple years, we found over 3,000 lineal feet of waterfront property just to the south of the existing marine terminal. And through the support of our board, we purchased and expanded the footprint of the Port of Albany by 25%. That played perfectly with the vision of New York State and NYSERDA in the offshore wind industry. We were not sure when we first purchased the land how we were going to do it as a transportation driver, but we seized on, and our board gave us the full support, said go get it. And through the unbelievable work of my team here, we were successful in following the NYSERDA lead, and certainly with the assistance of CEG in partnering with all of the developers in an effort to gain success in bringing offshore wind manufacturing to the Port of Albany. In January of this year, as you heard earlier, the port was named as the first in the United States offshore wind tower manufacturing site. We're very proud to partner with Equinor and Marmon and Welcon on a joint venture to build these impressive wind towers here at the Port of Albany. And that our surrounding communities, I'm sure, are going to benefit from residual complementary work that will go on with the offshore wind towers. We started even before we had been named on any applications. We started an aggressive environmental quality review and permit application for our site in the town of Bethlehem, which is just south of the Port of Albany. We worked very closely with town leadership in Bethlehem and also the city and county leadership in Albany. It was a great partnership, and working with New York State's Department of Environmental Conservation and the DOT, everybody together made this happen, and our engineers were awarded the generic go-ahead for our development of this land. We are now embarking on a very aggressive engineering, development, and construction schedule. We've been working closely with our neighborhood groups. We certainly want to improve the impact we have on an environmental justice community. We've put it at the forefront of all of our applications that we want to leave no harm and improve the economic standing of our neighborhoods. But as we speak today, our engineering firms, we've got two engineering firms working on the development of both our wharf and all of our upland buildings and civil site. We plan to be in front of the planning board by summer for our site plan approvals. By the end of 21 and beginning of 22, we intend to be doing all of our civil site development. In 22, which is hard to believe that it's so close, but in 22, we plan to begin construction of this one-of-a-kind wind tower manufacturing sites in the United States. We expect the construction of this to continue through 22 and into 23. In 2023 late or first quarter of 2024, we anticipate that this maritime and manufacturing facility will begin operations and fulfill our dream of a long-term partnership in the offshore wind industry. We feel that the far-reaching effect of what Marmon and Welcon and Equinor are doing at this facility will afford other developers and manufacturers the opportunity to team on here, and will not only be supporting New York's offshore wind effort, but I believe that you'll see this project support the entire East Coast of the United States. So the opportunities are endless. The excitement of today's presentations and what we feel are the future of the Port of Albany are very high right now, and we believe that they're going to remain at this level many years into the future. Through the years, I've had the opportunity to attend with some of my staff a lot of offshore wind events, and I'm happy to say, and I know our next speaker, but I'm happy to say that one of our Albany County ports, the Port of Equinor, was also successful. And all through this effort, we've said that nobody can do this by themselves. So to have the Port of Equinor 10 miles south of us have another big part of this. I know Josh Kowalski has put a lot of effort into it, and his team down at Queens. So I'm really happy that both of these ports are seeing a success from their efforts, and you know, we can only look to complement each other as we go forward, and make this region a better place to live and work. One last thing before I close is that the Port of Albany has had several firsts, and one of them being that we were the first New York State port to be admitted to the Green Marine Society. We seen that we needed to improve our environmental standing. The environment is our lifeblood, and 5 years ago, the port was admitted to Green Marine. We work constantly, and we strive to improve our environmental footprint on a daily basis. Something as small as just recycling or shredding paper, to something as large as looking at how we can reduce our diesel emissions and any other, even noise emissions. We're working hard to it, but we're proud that again, we're first in the United States for offshore wind tower manufacturing. We're the first port in New York State to be admitted to Green Marine, and there's a lot of other firsts still to come. Thank you very much.
Rich, thank you so much. And as Rich said, our next speaker is Josh Kowalski. Josh is a VP at the Port of Queens. And again, we would not be able to realize the opportunities in this region without our port assets. And so Rich and Josh and all of your teams are absolutely critical for developing and growing this industry in the capital region. Josh?
Yes, thank you, Katie. Thank you, Mark, Katie, Dave Rooney, all the group at CEG and the Chamber of Commerce for putting on this seminar. You guys continue to be out in front of these of these events. I know in the past we've worked with CEG on some supply chain models, which has really helped bring in the different businesses that are already established here in the capital region and show them what the opportunities are for the different businesses, the different aspects of the offshore wind. Rich Hendricks and his team up there in Albany, we couldn't be more excited to see the first wind tower manufacturer in the United States for offshore wind. To be started here, and we just think that helps develop the whole region for these opportunities. So if I can find my arrow here. So I wanted to give a little, whoop, I guess I hit it a couple times. I'm going to need a little, one step back, please, Kyle. No, I guess I'm moving ahead. There we go. So just a quick history on the Port of Queens. It's a plot of land here on the Hudson River, a deep water access port. In 1885, it was established as Sutton and Sutherly Brick Company and continued to manufacture bricks with the high clay content in the soil up until the early 2000s. The last 40 years, it was operated under the Powell and Minnick name for P&M Brick. Sometimes you find bricks around the area still labeled P&M Brick, and they were made right here in Queens. So this was the last brick manufacturer on the Hudson River. And I give you that background just to keep in mind the established manufacturing in this area and the way this area has always had a hardworking group of people that know how to get the projects done. In 2003 to the present, the Carver companies purchased the Port of Queens, and we've been operating under the Port of Queens name since. Trying to advance slides. Oh, there we go. Kyle, I might need you to drive. I apologize. Kyle, can you hear me? All right. Next, there you go. So in 2005, the 145th Street Bridge was built here on site. And that kind of started our modularization of these large construction projects to be built here on site and to be put on barges and moved down to primarily the greater New York area. Next slide, please. In 2010, the Willis Avenue Bridge, which weighed in at 3,000 tons, was built here. And at that time, we built our main dock area to have a heavy capacity for projects like this, to be able to what we call a roll-on, roll-off operation, where we roll that out onto a barge using Goldhofer trailers or hydraulic trailers for a project like that. Next slide, please. The Tappan Zee Bridge, the replacement, the Mario Cuomo Bridge, was put on the water here. Was a lot of the fabrication was done here, putting in the airlines, the safety features for the girders before they went down and were put in place on the site. Next slide. In 2017 and 2018, the first time ever in the United States, we were able to build here on site and transport 4,000-ton heat recovery steam generators for PSE&G. The first one went to Seawarren, New Jersey. The second one went to Bridgeport, Connecticut. In doing these projects, it really helped to establish us and kind of put us on the map for offshore wind opportunities in the United States. Next slide. The Pier 55 project, we're very proud of our team for helping participate in that project. And what that project did was that brought some local manufacturers, the Fort Miller Company, and ourselves together. We did welding of the stainless steel of these pods for the little island down off of New York City, and then we transported it out onto a barge and brought it down to be put in site by Weeks Marine. Next slide. With those experiences, and when we looked at the offshore wind opportunity, we looked at our port and then we looked at some of the European ports, and we saw a lot of similarities. So if you look on the left, you'll see the makeup of our yard when the Tappan Zee Bridge was here, and then on the right would be a similar situation where they're putting transition pieces on top of foundation sections. And in the bottom part is the heat recovery steam generator built by PSE&G. And on the right-hand side would be a substation for the offshore wind opportunities. So we think we've established with our workforce here and what we can do here, our capabilities on site, a real energy around this offshore wind opportunity. Next slide. And as the past speakers have mentioned, we look at the offshore wind sites out in the Atlantic. And just in this picture alone, you see many sites that we can reach from the Hudson River here. So by establishing what Albany's establishing with the tower manufacturer, and to see and to establish a gravity-based structure foundation site here, we think that we can reach most of those locations from the Hudson River. Next slide. The job opportunities we see here on site would definitely be welders, definitely heavy construction, laborers, operators, but we also look at things like engineering and logistics. And I think those are things that locally the colleges and schools are focusing on already. And I think that helps build the capital region as a draw for the offshore wind opportunities. Things like marine logistics, I think is something that definitely is coming for us here in the near future. Next slide. And then as far as our company, where the opportunities would be, our Carver stevedoring arm, we've done various onshore wind projects with offloading vessels. We've done bulk cargo, which we're going to need multiple teams, going up and down the East Coast for these projects. Next slide. Our maritime group, the Queens Marine Towing. Right now we have nine vessels that we operate, mostly on the Hudson River, but we do some offshore towing with a couple of our larger boats. But we see a lot of opportunity for mariners, whether it's captains, whether it's deckhands, whether it's logistics people. Next slide. Our sand and gravel team. We have several gravel pits around. We've looked at a lot of opportunities with scour protection for these wind projects. They're going to need to bring in virgin material for the foundation. So there's a lot of opportunities for the sand and gravel team. Next slide. And then some of our tenants here on site that are going to benefit. CTI is Composite Technology and Infrastructure. They do specialized coatings and specialized wraps for these type of projects. And then we have two barge groups, the Poseidon Sectional Barge Company and the McDonough Marine Services, which we believe will also benefit from these opportunities. Next slide. And these are just some of the welding projects that will be undertaken and some of the operating projects we believe that are coming in the near future. So thank you again. It's a really, really exciting opportunity, exciting time for the whole region. Thank you.
Thank you to Rich and to Josh. So throughout this program, we have heard about the nation's first offshore wind tower manufacturer being located in Albany. And we are thrilled to have Patrick Pellerin, president of Marmon, and Karsten Pedersen, chairman of Welcon. And we have the both of them here today to talk about the investment, to talk about their companies, and to share the exciting things to come. So welcome to Patrick and to Karsten. I am going to turn it over to the both of you. So you hear, for the folks in the audience, you hear us mentioning Kyle. Kyle is our AV guru today, helping us out. And so I think Patrick and Karsten, if you click on the presentation and then use the arrows to advance, you should be all set.
Thank you, Patty. Hello to everybody. Marmon Welcon is a joint venture between Marmon from Canada and Welcon from from Denmark. And as good partners, we will also jointly do the presentation. So I will start off by making a brief presentation of Welcome. And after that, Patrick will take over and present Marmen, and he will continue talking about our exciting project in Albany. And then I will finalize the presentation by talking about some new green products that we potentially could also make in our new factory in Albany. But first, I would like to say that we are super happy that we, together with Equinor and Port of Albany, get the possibility to build a top modern offshore tower factory in Albany, which will be the first of its kind in all America. We are all very excited and can't wait to get started producing offshore towers in the state of New York. So it should go to the next slide when I'm clicking. Here we go, yeah. Welcome is a family-owned company from Denmark. It was founded in 1960 by my father, and today my brother and me own the company. We are producing both onshore and offshore towers, and over the last 10 years, we have specialized our factory to produce offshore towers. We have produced 50% of all offshore towers in Europe. We are producing 25 sections per week. Welcome manufactured actually the first 2 towers for the Coastal Virginia offshore project installed last year. So you could say we already have made the 2, Marmen already have made 2 offshore towers in the waters of America. This here is a picture of our factory in Denmark. You can see it started in 1960 with one shop, and then almost every year we have built one shop onto the factory. So today I think we are 45 shops at this site. We have around 4.8 million square feet of land, and we have around 840,000 square feet on the roof. The factory is actually located 80 kilometers from the sea, so we have some extra costs bringing our tower sections to the sea for shipping. But we are still able to compete with factories located at the sea, and also factories from low-cost countries, because we have built a very lean production with top modern machinery. And this is the same we are going to do in Albany with the factory. This picture here is showing a factory we are building in Taiwan. It's a venture with a Taiwanese company. The factory will have the similar size and output as a factory we're going to build in Albany. This factory here, as you can see, is already been constructed now, and it will be able to produce towers in the middle of next year. So now I hand over to Patrick, please.
You hear me? Yeah, okay. If you please can give me control of the presentation, I will continue the presentation on the slides. Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm Patrick Pellerin. I'm the president and owner with my 2 sisters of Marmen. Marmen was founded by my father in '72, and Marmen is the family name of my mother. We're located in Quebec, just 5 hours driving from Albany. So it's very easy. We're mainly a large fabrication, machining, and mechanical assembly company. This is the kind of work that we do. I struggle a little bit with. Okay, this is the kind of work that we do. So we are looks like. Okay, this is the kind of work that we do. So we're involved both in hydro, steam, gas turbine, nuclear, oil and gas, mining, aviation, space, industry. So we do these different kind of products. We were doing that before going into wind. We're still doing that at the moment. It's a big, big part of our business. Sorry, I just struggle with my mouse here a lot. As a matter of fact, isn't it?
Les flèches à plat.
Non, ça marche pas. So this is, I'll make it happen, don't worry. So this is our facility in South. We have 3 wind facilities. This is our facility in South Dakota that we established in 2013, but we do in there only onshore towers. So just to give you an idea about the size of these components, what you see in the middle is a tube, which is it's one section of a tower. It's about 80 feet long, 8 feet, the smallest diameter, 14 feet, the biggest diameter. So this is much, much, much smaller than what we'll do on the offshore business. Before talking about exactly what we are going to do with Welcome, I have to talk about something, a personal note here. As Carson, similar to Carson, we're extremely happy to be in New York, but I have to say that there is a personal touch to it for us. As I was saying to public official a few weeks ago, public official from New York, we have been doing business in the States for 30 years now. And everything started in Schenectady in 1992. This is when we started to do business in the States. Our first visit at G Schenectady in 1992. And since then, naturally, we made many, many, many meetings and many, many trips in your area. And we did a lot of work in Quebec for the US out of that first meeting. Now to come back 30 years later and have with Welcome the opportunity to offer all these jobs to the capital region, it's like, in a sense, like payback time for us, and we're super happy about that. Honestly, we're proud and very happy to be able to do that now. It means a lot to us, sincerely. Now, okay, our association with Welcome. We have been looking at the offshore industry for many, many years. We visited all the sites in the US, talked to all the states. And at one point, we decided that it was time that time has come, it was time to do something special. So we decided in 2 years ago to work together to make it happen. Okay, why? Because working together, we're much, much stronger than separate. And why we were much more stronger is simply for many things. First of all, the expertise. If we were together, Marman is a leading wind tower, onshore wind tower manufacturing in North America. We have over 1,000 employees in North America. We have 6 plants, 3 dedicated to the wind business. We have almost 50 years of experience in manufacturing. We have done since 2003, because we started to do wind in beginning of 2003, close to 30,000 tower sections. And we have the capacity in our 3 facilities to make 3,000 onshore tower sections per year. Welcome is the #1 leader in offshore tower. They have over 550 employees in the world. 55 years of experience in steel manufacturing, 4,000 offshore tower sections since 2012, and the capacity of over 1,100 onshore and offshore tower sections. You have to understand, and you will see that the offshore tower sections are much, much bigger. So naturally, it takes more time to do. So together, that's a lot of expertise that we were able to offer to the market. Okay. Also, what about the joint venture? You know, what we're offering is we are considered the best onshore tower manufacturing and the best offshore tower manufacturing facilities in the world. So I think that working together, that's really a great offer to the market. Also, we're both established company in the US and in Europe, and all that. This is where the market is happening as we speak now. We did share our expertise on everything, facility, equipment, processes, and everything, so that the facility that will be built in New York will, without any doubt, be the most efficient, advanced manufacturing facilities with respect to offshore towers and transition pieces. There is no doubt about that. And the goal, that's the goal, is to be able to make towers on the East Coast at a similar landed prices versus European or Asian towers. You know, in Europe and in Asia, they have a super competitive cost structure, extremely competitive cost structure, but have a big disadvantage when it comes to the US, is that they have to ship these pieces, and these pieces are big, so it's expensive. Transportation cost is expensive. So this is what the goal is. You know, we will always have the competition from these countries, but that's the goal of everything, that it's to be competitive in the US compared to the landed prices from Europe or Asia. Now, more detail about the capacity of what we can do over there, okay? First of all, we want to build the offshore tower of the next generation. And the offshore tower that we will start building in 2003, they just do not exist at the moment. They are on the drawing board. They don't exist at the moment. You know, what is being done at the moment are smaller towers. So very, very, very few facilities in the world can do the towers of the future generation. And it's more than the future generation, because we know that the towers and the turbines that are coming, the 13 to 15 megawatt machine, in 6, 7, 8, 9 years, it will be much bigger than that. So we have to prepare for that. And out of that, that's the size of the components that we will be able to make. That's the size of the components we'll be able to make over there. Sections, the tower can be out of 2 or 4 sections at the moment. So it could be sections that are up to 10 meter in diameter, 70 meter long, 400 metric ton. You know, in the offshore, everybody is talking in the metric system. So if I put that in the English system, it's about 32 feet in diameter per component, 230 feet long, and 450 short ton. So we're talking about really massive. And this is not the tower. This is only for one section of the tower. So we're talking here about really massive components. You know, we want to be able to make about 160 of those towers per year, or 100 towers and transition piece per year. I will talk later on about these different products. And we plan to about 360 employees full production, which should be by the end of 2025 or beginning of 2026. And the construction phases, as Rich mentioned earlier, Rich from the Port of Albany, between 2021 to 2023 is the port infrastructure and the building, and we expect to start production by the end of 2023. So that's really what we're going to do. And actually, we need to have a very solid involvement of the community to make it happen. And we're 100% convinced that it is going to happen. You know, our facility in South Dakota is working very well. We had a very strong implication in the community and from the community. Just to give you an example, with respect to schools in South Dakota, which is a much smaller state, you know, we work with 9 high schools, 33 technical schools. By that, I mean sponsorship, scholarship, apprenticeship, all these kind of things. And we intend to do the same and more in New York, simply because that facility will be much, much bigger. And what you just saw in these last 3 slides is exactly the sales pitch that we made to our 2 team partners in the Port of Albany, simply because we needed a port with all the available space to do such a big project and the adequate management team to make it happen. And with Equinor, simply because we needed Equinor, which is the leader of the team, we needed a developer to believe in the idea, to support the idea, to include the idea and proposal to NYSERDA, and to convince NYSERDA that it was a good idea. And they have been successful, and naturally we're extremely happy about that. Now I will talk a little bit more about the project itself, and then I will talk about the product. Okay, so this is the project. Okay, this is what you see in gray is more or less what is called Beacon Island. So what you see in gray at the moment, it doesn't look like that at all, but this is what, so the first step, I would say between now and mid-2022 is to make what you see in gray, the gray area. Then started mid-2022, put up the building. There will be 4 big buildings, in total 600,000 square feet of building, between 60 feet to 80 feet high. So that's massive facilities. We need the 4. We absolutely need the 4. So every piece that you see will go in these 4 facilities. So the start of the facility, the construction will start mid-2022, and we'll start put equipment in it sometime in 2023. So the goal is that in the 4th quarter of 2023, we start produce equipment. So now I'll talk about the product. You know, this is a center for economic growth meeting. So I assume that there are some suppliers or potential suppliers listening and try to find out, you know, what can we do for offshore, or what can we do to support Marmon and welcome in that process. So now I will talk about the different components that we expect to make there. There are 3 components. I'll talk about the first 2, and Carson will talk about the last one. So the core of the production will be towers. You know, what you see, which is the white components, and that will be the core, simply because for every turbine needs a tower. It is as simple as that. As you can also see, we need a lot of storage space, simply because when we make these products, they are not necessarily shipped to the site in the ocean right away. You know, there's a big time delay between the start of the production and start of shipment. That's why we need a lot of storage area. So you see what the white components are the towers, the sections of towers, and the yellow component that you see are what we call transition pieces. I will talk about each of them. The best way to realize the magnitude of the component, you know, well, unfortunately, it looks like you may not be able to see it, but if you look at the bottom of the screen, there is a red circle, and inside the red circle, you should be able to see someone, but I cannot see it on my screen, unfortunately. Perhaps some of you can see it, but that's just to give you an example of the monster, how these parts are super big. It's even extremely difficult to figure out until you see one of them. But this is the crane on the wharf will look similar to that. You know, it won't be that one, but it will be roughly that kind of size. So assume that these big white tubes are about 30 feet in diameter and hundreds of feet long. That gives you an idea about the size of these monsters. And so what we may need, what we're looking for suppliers with respect to that, you know, on the top of suppliers being involved in the construction and suppliers being involved in the supply of the steel facility and involved in the supplying consumable that we need when we make these products. But the product itself, you know, the product itself, it's made of steel. So to make these big tubes, we will buy all the steel from the US. So we'll receive a plate of steel. We will roll this plate, so that makes a can, and then we weld these cans together. Then you make these sections, or let's call it tube to make it simple. At the extremity, so all the steel will come from the US. At the extremity of each of these sections, you have big flanges because all these tubes are bolted together on site. These flanges, at the moment, there is just no US supply that can make those. So at the moment, it would come from Asia, mainly China or South Korea, because this is the only place where you have forging companies able to make that size of components. What you're looking at is not a real picture, that's a drawing. So what is important is what goes inside. And this is where we will need suppliers, which everything that goes on the inside, because on the inside of these towers, you have what we call internals, which is mechanical internals, platforms, ladders, all kinds of bracket in steel or in aluminum, and electrical components. And there is a lot, there's a lot of that going inside these big tubes. Make no mistake about it, that's an extremely competitive market, but the opportunity is there. And it's up to people to take that opportunity and to make it happen. So this is, as I said, the steel will come from the US, the big steel mill in the US, the flanges from Asia at the moment, but the internal component, it is definitively open to be part of that product. Now, the other part that we expect to make is what we call the transition piece. The transition piece is the yellow part that you see. That's the yellow part that, because the tower never touched itself, the ocean, but that's the yellow part. And to understand a little bit more about it, I have just made that little stuff. So you see the transition piece is in the middle. Part of it is in the ocean, part of it is outside the ocean. On the top of it, you put the turbine, but the transition piece, it's a transition between the tower itself and the monopile. The monopile and the transition piece and the monopile are part of the foundation of the turbine, and the monopile goes into the sediment at the bottom of the ocean. So this is one type of foundation. In New York, there will be many different types of foundation, but this is one type of foundation. It's the most common one in the world at the moment, but it's not the only one. So we expect that when that type of foundation will be used either in New York or in other states, we will have the opportunity to quote and make these transition pieces. These transition pieces can be super big. Once again, I think this time you may see it at the bottom of the screen. You have the red circle again, and you see one guy. This is a real picture. And this is what it looks like. So it can be very big. It can be 20, 30 meter high. It can weigh 300 to 500 tons. It can be 8, 9 meter in diameter. It's full of stock inside these tubes. I think that unless I'm wrong, and Grant, correct me, Grant from Ørsted, correct me if I'm wrong, but Grant was talking about different steel or concrete components involved in their product. And you can see the platform outside, which can be done either in steel or in concrete, and many stuff that goes inside. So this is also something that we will be looking for suppliers from New York State to help us do that, because our job mainly will be to make the tube and to assemble everything, and not to make like the outside platform or things like that. So this is two of the main components that we expect to make out of our facility in Albany. And we want to make more components because we want just to diversify in such a way that the shop will always be full. Now I will let Karsten talk about the final and third component that we expect to make at that facility, which is an extremely exciting one.
Thank you, Patrick. I think we're using our time, so I'll try to do it fast. Can I get the next one? Can I get the next slide? Or control over it? It's difficult to be a joint venture. Here we are. So at Welcome, we are also a partner and a shareholder in the company Treseder. And yes, it is the legendary Treseder James from the embassy was talking about in the beginning of the seminar. He founded this company Treseder, and we are working very close together, and as I said, a shareholder. At Treseder, we are developing and producing products that are needed for the green transition in the world. And some of those products may be suitable for production in our factory in Albany in the future, especially one of them. Can I get the next page? Somehow I'm not in control. Yeah. We have 4 product lines in the company, and just fast, the first one on the left, this is the floating foundations, which is very interesting for our factory in Albany. It will be used in the American waters also. It's a floating foundation, and it's used in the future when you get deeper than around 50 meters. Then it's more economical to have a floater than the fixed bottom foundations we're using today, the monopiles and the jackets. The second product we're doing is energy storage. We are storing compressed hot air and cold air in large tanks with crushed stones. And the third product we're developing is hydrogen systems. We're developing a simple alkaline system that is very suitable for mass production. And the last product is a product we call Sky Clean. It's a carbon negative fuel system using farmland waste. Yes, and we take the next one. Oh, I'm back. Here you see 3 different ways of floating foundations. The first one is a spar version, and the middle is called a semi-sub, and the one to the right is called tension leg floater. And our steel cell foundations is suitable for all 3 systems. And the last page here, we are showing the first demo foundation we have made in Denmark. It's produced at Belcon, and maybe you can see why we think it's suitable for our tower factory in Albany, because it's made out of sections like tower sections you may be able to see. And one of the advantages with our floating system is that we manufacture, mass produce everything in factories and drive it to almost any port. We don't need any dry docks. We don't need anything in the port except a flat land and 8-meter depth in the harbor. And then we assemble all the members with pin bolts, like you could say, like Lego systems. We assemble everything without any welding, without any dry dock, without any painting. We assemble the whole system within 1 week. And then we put it in the water, put on the wind turbine with an onshore crane, and then we tow it out to the site. And this here is actually a very new picture. We are going to float this first demo project here in May this year, and we tow it up to Norway, where we have a test station. Yes, I think we should stop now. We're taking too much time. Thank you for listening.
Patrick and Karsten, thank you so much. It may have taken a little bit more time, but I was engaged throughout. So, and I know that I learned something, and I know that, you know, many on the call, on the video, I'm sure did as well. So I'd like to move into a presentation on workforce readiness. So I think that this is probably one of the most active areas in the region. And I know that we have so many partners on today that are willing and ready to engage. And so we've invited Ross Gould from the Business Network for Offshore Wind. The Business Network is a US-wide network, and he's able to give that macro view on the type of workforce that's needed for this industry. And I think you heard, as we went through some of our presentations, you know, some of that some of the more specific local needs. And we know that this is an evolving area in the region, and this is a high-level conversation of what are many to come. And I know that many are having as we speak. So Ross, I'll let you move into your presentation.
Thank you very much, Katie. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Just checking to make sure I get control, and I did. Well, thank you, Katie, and Mark, Eagan, David, everyone at CEG for putting this together, and for the invitation to be a part of this conversation today. Thank you to all the companies who we heard from earlier as well. I always enjoy the opportunity to learn from you and see what you're doing firsthand. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ross Gould, Vice President for Supply Chain Development at the Business Network for Offshore Wind. For about the last decade, I've been focusing on the people and businesses of the energy sector, identifying the skills required and gaps in the energy workforce and capabilities and needs for businesses seeking to take advantage of these opportunities in renewable energy that we're talking about here today. And those of you that know me, and I see many familiar faces, well, I don't see faces, I see many familiar names listed here today, and I'd be seeing you all if we were together in Albany, but I look forward to that opportunity. I've seen many of you know how interested I am and how focused I am on offshore wind. I joined the Business Network in December 2010 to oversee the expansion and evolution of supply chain and workforce initiatives at the Business Network. The Business Network for Offshore Wind is a 501c3 membership organization whose mission is to grow offshore wind, renewable energy, and its supply chain. The network is the only organization solely dedicated to offshore wind, renewable energy, and its supply chain. And we currently have over 300 members, many of whom, including the Center for Economic Growth that you heard today, and Marmin as well, and many others, Equinor, Ørsted, and others you heard from today. And the network is a connector. The network is a connector and facilitator of collaborations and partnerships. The network has brought together over 9,000 individuals from nearly 2,000 companies to share information and connect them around the offshore wind market in the US. Today, we have already heard a lot about the parts of the industry, the towers, foundation, transition pieces that'll be built right here in the capital region. I'm going to give you a picture of what people who will be working in the offshore wind industry will be doing and some of the skills required more broadly. As you heard earlier today, offshore wind is on the precipice of significant growth in the US. Doreen Harris mentioned how historic and on the verge of history we are right now. So it is really an exciting time to be in the industry. And there are a large number of opportunities for workers and businesses. There are actually over 8,000 components found in an offshore wind project and more than 500 different products and services to put the wind project together. What you see looking at here on the left is what we call our supply chain wheel or workforce wheel. It breaks down the different buckets of work across and on the components across 4 phases of the industry. You'll see that we have permitting and siting, manufacturing, construction, installation, and operation and maintenance. There is a diverse technical workforce in each of these areas, including electricians, welders, iron workers, pile drivers, engineers, scientists, vessel operators, and even lawyers like me. And our friends over at the Workforce Development Institute, based right out here in Albany, have actually identified in a report they did, identified 74 occupations across the industry and all. And for those who are interested in numbers, some studies have shown that you heard earlier Congressman Tonko talking about 77,000 jobs from the offshore wind industry. OEA has kind of projected at around 80,000 or so. So yes, the Congressman's numbers are up to date and correct. The reports indicate that approximately 1,000 construction jobs per project. And additionally, others are showing that for every 100 turbines constructed, you're seeing 6,000 supply chain jobs, like those jobs that we've heard discussed a little bit that you'll be seeing in the ports in Albany and Queens. To date, with an industry on the verge of taking off, the network has identified over 500 contracts involving the 16 active leases on the East Coast. And about 60% of those contracts are with US-based companies involved. We've noted that $3.5 billion in investments in ports and manufacturing are already occurring in the East Coast, along the East Coast of the United States. And a recent supply chain study reports indicates that there's $100 billion in capital and operating investments to be seen along the East Coast as we reach the 30 gigawatts of potential. Now, project developers are already hiring, and one project developer actually plans to hire 70 individuals this year as they move their project into construction. Project developers are also ordering large component pieces, and the tier one manufacturers such as Marmon and Welcon that you heard from are pre-qualifying bidders or requesting, putting out requests for proposals for suppliers to be working with them in their projects. Now, that's not to say that Marmon and Welcon are already putting theirs out. I'm just saying others like them have moved to that phase. And just last week, we heard it announced that Vineyard Wind is going to be contracting with Foss Maritime, a company headquarters in Seattle, Washington, to provide vessel support and the vessels to ferry workers and equipment out to the installation site during the construction and installation of the Vineyard Wind project. And as you can see, it's construction workers, management, maintenance workers, legal, port infrastructure, and support vessels, and many more. But now I want to just take a look at what you're seeing here in Albany to help give you a better picture of the jobs real quick. And here you're looking at the concrete foundations that will be made out of the Port of Queens. And they're going to be floated down the Hudson River. It would be an exciting sight. Now, these concrete foundations weigh about 15 to 18,000 tons, and they require 200 workers per shift to be working on them for about 3 years to build. And they'll be pouring concrete, 3,000 tons or so of concrete per foundation. There's 100,000 tons of rebar that needs to be fastened into the foundations. Workers will use steel fabrication skills. They're going to produce ladders and deckings and railings and welding those ladders and deckings and railings to the pieces that will be for foundation for the transition pieces that will be attached onto the foundations. You'll need welding, people with welding skills, cutting skills, rigging skills, and heavy operators. I saw my friend Mike Lyons from the Building and Construction Trades and the operating engineers and cranes and lifting equipment operators will be needed for these projects. And then just quickly over you heard significant discussion about the tower work over at the Port of Albany. What you're looking at here is an individual who's rolling cans, as they like to call it. They will be using a CNC rolling machine to roll large plates of steel. You can see this one operator here who not only needs to know how to operate a CNC machine, but will also need to measure. They'll break down at points and pull out measuring equipment to measure, to make measurements to make sure they are precisely bending the can that they need. From here, this piece will be lifted to another site, and it'll be before it's lifted, it is welded shut. A tack welder gets into that large piece and will weld it. From there, it gets lifted to another location and moved and transported with large equipment around the port. And then it'll be welded again to its additional sections to build your large, 4 or 5 of those will be welded together, as you heard earlier from the Marmon Welcon presentation. And again, these are equipment operators, riggers, steel fabrication, weldings and welding certifications and standards that need to be but also you need people who are warehouse specialists and stevedores to eventually load these out onto the vessels and barges to bring them down at the ocean. And finally, I'd be remiss not to mention the people that these pieces are going to be out in a harsh environment in the ocean, in a sea, with sea, and could be a harsh and corrosive environment. So anti-corrosive coatings and paintings are applied as well. So people with skill sets in painting and coating are also extremely needed in these areas. And one more, you had heard a quick conversation on the transition pieces. Again, these are large infrastructure pieces. About 4 transition pieces can be fabricated per week. So that's for a wind farm with 80 turbines, that's about 20 weeks or 5 months worth of work. And the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, who oversees the leasing and permitting on the outer continental shelf, tells us that that there's approximately about 2,000 turbines can be anticipated out in the Atlantic Ocean. So you can see there's a steady stream of pipeline of work that's needed. And again, these are large steel structures. They have platforms, ladders. These all need to be welded onto the pieces, and then they needed to be blasted, coated, and painted into place. And then stevedores will take them to barges where you have pilots, extremely well-trained pilots, barging them down the Hudson River. So I see we're running on, and so I just wanted to give you a quick overview here today of the workforce and some of this. And thank you for the opportunity, Katie, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Ross. I think that in the interest of time, we are going to move into the final few comments, and unfortunately have to cut the Q&A, but I would encourage participants today to reach out to CEG if you want to drop some of your questions or comments in the chat as I finish up my presentation. These are things that we can address in a follow-up. Or know that we want to focus on them in the future. So please don't be afraid to drop your questions in the chat, and we will find a way to get those answers to you, whether it's immediately following or into the future. If you want to pull up my presentation, I am going to try to get to the point here in the few minutes that we have. I realize that you've seen my face and you've heard my voice, but I've not properly introduced myself. So I am Katie Newcomb. I'm the Chief Economic Development Officer with the Center for Economic Growth. You've heard a lot about us today. And I think that, you know, I want to take us back to what Mark said in the beginning. At its basic mission, CEG is trying to drive economic growth in the capital region. And we do this by working with our partners, state and local, our ports, our developers, our utility partners, our colleges and universities. So we don't do this alone, right? So we complement and elevate the work of the people in the region. And so what are some of the things that we do? Site selection, incentive and resource coordination, new location and expansion assistance, industry research and analysis. But what I want to talk to you about today very briefly is our work to help local manufacturers grow and our work to help connect in the supply chain. So I am going to skip a few of these slides. All I wanted to tell you is it's a big supply chain opportunity out there. You've heard a lot about the opportunities in New York, but what's more than that, as Ross mentioned, and my numbers were out of date, but what Ross mentioned, $100 billion supply chain opportunity along the East Coast. We are seeing significant investment, and I will plug again, you know, the federal government's role at this point in, you know, more than animating the market, but creating that policy, creating the environment where we can start to see investment in component manufacturing and start to see that pipeline that is necessary for the major investment that we're seeing, for instance, by Marmon and Welcon, but for our OEMs to say, okay, we'll do it in the US now, right? Or we'll set up that second location. And so I want to leave you today with how CEG can help, how CEG is a resource when we're talking about supply chain and working with our manufacturers. So through our Manufacturing Extension Partnership and our Regional Technology Development Center, we have federal and state funding. We are a dedicated partner through our Business Growth Solutions team to work with our manufacturers. We've developed an intake form specific to the offshore wind industry. So we will work with you as a manufacturer to determine, you know, what are you doing now? What do you need to do? How and can you enter this market, right? So we'll look at that roadmap, that supply chain roadmap, and help you figure out how and where you fit in. We can help with market intelligence, right? So what products and what associated opportunities could you realize in the offshore wind market? And then, you know, additionally, manufacturing readiness. So are there certifications that you need as a manufacturer? Those could be ISO certifications, quality management certifications, or perhaps a particular OEM has certifications that they want you to be able to get as a tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3 supplier, right? And so we can counsel on that, and we can help you obtain those certifications. It could be environmental or social as well. And you may not know where to start. So let us help you with a sales growth or a market entry strategy. So again, I really want to be able to focus on the fact that CEG is here. We have state and federal funding. We are a dedicated partner, both for our manufacturers in the region to help you figure out how to enter this, and then also our OEMs, right? How do we help become that matchmaker? And again, not in a vacuum, right? We heard from so many people today. This is a team sport. And so I just saw something dropped into the chat. For our local manufacturers, there are also potential grant opportunities for you to be able to take on this market expansion, to take on these ISO products, or perhaps you need to do something on the shop floor to make yourself more productive as part of this process, or quality management. And so National Grid has a manufacturing productivity grant. NYSEG, the other utility in our region, has a grant that is very similar. It doesn't offset 100%, but it's significant. And you can work with your MEP center, you can work with CEG to be able to access those funds. And I also want to be able to mention the WDI, the Workforce Development Institute, longtime partner of manufacturers across the state and longtime partner of CEG. Ross mentioned, and so did some of our other participants today, NYSERDA has a supply chain database. The Business Network for Offshore Wind has one. You saw Ørsted's dropped into the chat. And then we have been keeping a regional database, a regional list of opportunities. I'm almost done, stick with me. And again, just to talk about CEG's role, right? We want to bring our manufacturers together. We want to bring that consortium together to help realize these opportunities. We've been talking about this for a long time, but the industry's at a tipping point. We're at a place where we have a supportive federal government and where we have seen states lead, New York State in particular, right? To animate the market, to go out and to create this kind of opportunity. So we want to make sure that not only are we attracting amazing companies and working with our partners to bring in, wonderful companies like Marmin and Welcon and work with our OEMs and our developers, we want to grow our own too, right? So help us be that matchmaker across the continuum from OEM to tier 3 and work across our partners and our networks to make it happen. Work with our MEP and our business growth solutions team. And if you're looking for a site in the region and you're not sure where to start, you can start with CEG. Again, we don't do it alone. We work with all of our partners. And again, I'll just plug workforce development. So we have so many amazing workforce development partners, many of which were on the call today. Our community colleges, Hudson Valley Community College, BOCES are working through our workforce, workforce board, our high schools, our trade organizations. So, we have the wherewithal to get it done and to get people trained and to make sure that there's access and that there's opportunity for all as we're looking to fill these jobs now and into the future. And CEG has some of its own programs as well, such as an apprenticeship program that we will look to utilize. And I do also want to say that it's about building out this clean energy cluster. It's about making sure that we're maximizing opportunities, but it's about finding intersections with other industry as well. You heard Karsten mention hydrogen and storage. We look at advanced electronics and our capabilities in nanotech in the region and our amazing colleges and universities, Albany and the work that they're doing in weather research, and RPI and the work that they're doing in energy systems. And I'm not trying to leave anyone out, but we have the partnerships, we have the R&D capability, we have the manufacturing capability, and we have the workforce development partners to bring all of this together and realize the amazing opportunities that so many of our panelists talked about today. So with that, and we can drop these into the chat, but you'll have them in a follow-up email from me. Don't hesitate to reach out. I've put Michael's information up here. Dave Rooney, you heard from Dave earlier. He's been leading the charge for CEG in offshore wind and is a subject matter expert for us. And finally, I'm going to go back one. I want to reintroduce the virtual offshore wind tours that James talked about. We're looking to launch this probably the second week in May. We will get you the date, we will get you the sign up information, and we hope that everybody joins today will join us for this 7-part series. 7 weeks, an hour a week. Grab your lunch, come and sit with us and learn from our partners and in Denmark, and be thinking about how we can translate that into the region, right? And so you will absolutely get a follow-up on this. I may be annoying about it. I will ask you to share it with your friends. I will ask you to share it with your colleagues. So finally, a big thank you to our partners at the City of Albany, Capitalize Albany, Albany County, and the Advanced Albany County Alliance, as well as our AV sponsor today, CMI, and Couch White. Couch White, thank you so much. As Mark said, Couch White is a local law firm, but their reach is national, and they have a reputation in energy law, and they represent their clients on a variety of legal, regulatory, contractual, and policy matters relating to energy. And so we are so thrilled that they are supporting us today. And I'm 6 minutes over. Thank you for the 150 plus that stayed to hear me speak. But more than that, thank you for listening and supporting our panelists today. And thank you. Without everyone that showed up to talk, we would not have had such an amazing agenda and such an amazing turnout. We are so grateful to all of the speakers, and we look forward to being here as a resource. So anything that we can do to help, and you'll be hearing more about the industry and how to engage. With that, I'm going to say thank you.